Hello.
Hello, how are you?
How are you, Sorcha?
Not too bad. Grand.
Thanks for doing this, hey.
Yeah, that's grand. Grand.
Uh,
Thanks for
t-
the invitation.
You're involved with the Countess, which is an organization to do with helping families and or children and women.
Yeah, so we're an advocacy organization set up in 2020.
Hmm.
We're non-religious, non-political, non-partisan, non-funded, and we advocate. And a lot of it is to do with gender ideology and how that affects women, children, and vulnerable LGBT people. But we also are concerned more generally with women's rights and how changes will impact women. So we're campaigning against this referendum for that reason.
With regard to the upcoming referendum, what issues do you have with it with regards to the way is it worded or just how is it? Because I know that one of the ministers came out and said that a women's place, I think it was Catherine Martin, said that it says that women's place is in the home, and it never really actually says that. So they're kind of already kind of, you know,
Yeah.
spreading misinformation. So what is it that you actually have an issue with that's in the.
So we have so on the day you'll be asked to vote on two different items. One is a
Mhm.
change in the definition of family, which we can go into later if you want. But the other one is to us more important to women in particular, and that is the removal of Article 41.2. And Article 41.2, as you say, talks about women, but it talks about their role in their family lives.
Mhm.
Um, and we feel that, well, one, it's at least a recognition of the often undervalued work that women do in their families. And in particular, it offers a wording that may possibly be used by women, particularly mothers who don't wish to work outside the home or can't for some reason. So, for that reason, we are opposed to the removal of that article. And we also have some issues to do with the wording of the replacement article. So there's two kind of strands to our no. It's not a reactive response to this referendum or to the government's wording or anything like that, but we've looked into deeply what the meaning of the current wording is.
Mhm.
It's sexist. We don't believe it is. And what the meaning of the replacement wording is it good enough? We don't believe it is. So there's two reasons separately to really be against this proposal. Um, I can talk you through what the article actually says if you want, because in our canvassing, we've actually found that a lot of people are either unaware or
Yeah.
a little confused about what it actually
Yeah.
said. And so what we found helpful is actually having the exact text there and talking people through it. So the original and the replacement both have issues
Yeah.
in terms of how they speak about care and women and stuff like that. So the original article, I'll just if you bear with me for a second,
Yep.
I'll open it up here. Um, so Article 41.2 in its entirety talks about the family,
Mhm.
and the first part of it is what we'll be asked to change the definition of family, and it talks about uh, what they would like to do is add in and other durable relationships to the definition of family. So that's Article 41.1, and the whole article is entitled, in Irish, is entitled An Tailech, the family. So when we get then to Article 41.2, An Tailech is still retained in the Irish version, but it's magically changed from meaning the home, the family, to meaning the home in the English translation. But
Okay.
if you read it with, as I've done, with a kind of a more of a Gaeilgeoir hat on you, you see that it actually recognises women's contributions to their families by their family life. So it says, um,
Are you fluent in Irish?
yes.
Oh, I'm jealous. I'm actually. How sad is this? I'm actually learning Irish. I know it's
Not
pathetic because
bad at all. Oh my
it's
God, it's
it,
brilliant.
it's because it's teach so badly in school. I think,
Yeah,
and
yeah, absolutely,
I've reached that
100%.
point. I'm ashamed that I can't speak my own language, so I'm going back. But anyway, sorry to derail you.
No, ditch the shame and embrace the learning. That's what I say.
Yeah,
Yes, and I
exactly.
could go on for hours about the Irish language as well, but I won't today. But it does help when you realise that the Irish version of the Constitution is considered to be the original text, and the English is a translation.
Okay.
And when there's a conflict, it's the Irish version that has supremacy. So if there's a
Ah.
difference in meaning, it's the Irish version that is considered to be the correct version. And in
Right.
Article 41.2, I think this is quite important because it says in the English version, in particular, the state recognises that by her life within the home, woman gives to the state a support without which the common good cannot be achieved. So it says that uh, Trina Sales said Tyler, by her life within her family, is how I would read that. And
Okay.
I surprise questioned one of my kids who they also speak Irish. And I was like, what do you think the word Tyler means? And they were all like, oh yeah, like it's your family. Like, so it's not just me making this kind of assumption.
Yeah, yeah.
So it says that by her life within her family, women give to the state as a support. It's valuable to the state, and that although it's unpaid, it's very important for the whole of society. And the second part, so that's the kind of the recognition part, if you like. And the second part then talks about, it says the state shall therefore endeavour to ensure that mothers shall not be obliged by economic necessity to engage in labour to the neglect of their duties in the home. So it's sort of saying that we recognise that it's very important and we wish to protect mothers from that economic pressure. So it doesn't say they may not work in the home or that we think they shouldn't go out to work. It just says if they feel that working outside the home would cause them to neglect their duties, then we should endeavour to ensure that that doesn't happen. Now, this has never been really formally tested. And one of the major issues we have with this is it is about to be. So there's a woman taking case at the moment, it's due to be heard in April in the Supreme Court. And she will be relying on this article in her bid to get full carers allowance for her adult disabled child. So even knowing that, they set the date of the 8th of March, which means should she be successful, no other mother would be able to rely on that outcome. That case law would be gone if we remove this article now. So another reason to vote no is simply to wait and see what happens with that case, because she would be saying this is important. They'll be saying yes, it is. But in the meantime, we'll have taken it out, so no other mother would be able to rely on this. And the other part of that is that through our equality legislation, anything that mothers are offered under this provision would also apply to fathers who were in the same position. So although it talks about mothers, fathers couldn't be excluded on the basis of their sex from accessing supports that were deemed to be necessary under this clause, if you know what I mean. So it's a bit complicated.
And it's
It's
International Women's Day. They
Yeah,
have it on like
well,
just
that was
the
just, who do they think is going to be providing the childcare for all those closed polling
I
schools, like
know.
with the polling
Yeah.
stations? It's just a bit of an insult, really. But
Yeah.
all that aside, if you look at the Irish language again, I just want to go back to it. So it says her due to the neglect of her duties in the home, but actually the Irish says uh, the neglect of anulgish satile. So again, it refers to the family. And dulgish is not like it's not a job of work. It's not cleaning the floor. It's not the duties of like housework as such. It's
Okay.
high level responsibility. So like the Taoiseach would have dulgish, he would have duties. You know,
Yeah.
a nurse has dulgish, she has responsibilities for her patients. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it's that difference in interpretation. I suspect whoever wrote the English version in 1937 may have a sexist frame of mind, but if we look at the meaning of it, what it says is that parents, particularly mothers, like shouldn't have to make that choice of choosing to work for economic reasons. And it's very valid at the moment because 69% of women in a survey who are working mothers said that
Mm.
they would prefer not to be working full time, that they would prefer to be at home or full time with their children. And so they are working for economic necessity. This states that the state should endeavour to ensure. Could they rely on that? It's never been tested, so
Yeah.
we don't know. Basically, the sort of the feminist organisations have been fairly remiss because they've often dismissed this particular clause as being somewhat restrictive on women.
Hmm.
I with the deeper sort of with a deeper feminist analysis, you could see that actually it is ennobling, it lifts up and it recognises that women and mothers do actually do a good for the whole of society. Like 98% of all care is done by women. 94% of stay-at-home parents are the mother.
Hmm.
Women do 38 hours per week of housework. So to try and pretend that that's not the case, and that just by removing this, we'll suddenly magically be the best equal little nation in the country, in the world,
Yeah.
you know, it's just disingenuous, and it's sexist because it is removing the recognition of what sex is actually doing that particular role of caring. So,
Yeah.
for many reasons, we might be the only sort of organization who's saying this. We don't find this clause to be sexist, and we find it to be quite important.
So
And
other feminist organizations actually are voting yes.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay,
they're
that's
saying
interesting.
that it's regressive, it's restrictive, it states that a woman should stay at home, and all, that's their
Yeah.
interpretation of it.
Which it
Whereas
doesn't
ours
say.
is saying, well, it's honest, it's
Yeah.
accurate, and it offers something that could be used by women as protection. And we can't deny the differences in who is actually doing the work in the home. That's
Yeah.
sexist.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean? If you just try and pretend everything's equal, because even were all things equal, it's still women who become mothers. It's still women who go through pregnancy and birth, and who, if they breastfeed, breastfeed. But even if they're not breastfeeding, they're still feeding their infants, they're nurturing their infants. They're the most important person in that infant's life. And one of the strongest predictors of good mental health as an adult is the attachment you form as a baby, firstly with your mother, and then secondly with your father. So it is for the benefit of society. Even if we did 50-50 of everything, mothers are still very important and should be supported if they wish to be at home with their children for longer than the maternity leave allowances would give. Or worse, like if you're an unemployed mother and you're claiming social welfare, you have to start looking for work 8 weeks after your infant is born. So, we're moving away from the recognition that there is actually a difference between mothers and fathers, men and women. And that also, I think, should be resisted. This is the only mention of mothers in the Constitution. They
And had
want
they
to
actually
remove.
taken the word mother out? Well, that's
Yeah.
literally not in it because they were saying, oh, it's
Yeah.
still you still have the same kind of thing. But I mean, that's kind of a thing really in modern society, though. They're kind of it's this new thing of like you can put on a wig and say you're a woman, you're automatically a woman. You're like, come on,
Yeah.
man. If we reach that point, I mean, it's just daft. Like, it seems to be like. That kind like I mean, if Roderick O'Gorman is putting something in, I'm gonna be against it because that guy's just a fool. Like,
He doesn't seem to have thought through very clearly what
no,
how he's going to present this, or
no, it's so
why
rushed
he
though.
hasn't explained to me why it's a good thing to me. Like I've been listening to the yes votes, obviously, to try and counter their
Yeah, me
arguments,
too.
but all it seems to be is stories of people who felt this or thought that. But I haven't actually heard any meaningful change, any meaningful benefit that this will bring. When you compare that to the rights that were given by the Repeal the Eighth referendum, or the marriage equality referendum or the divorce referendum, you know, that you could see in those referendums, you could see what the outcome was going to be, what the change was going to mean for society, and you could make your decision based on that information. Even for the repeal, we even had the heads of the bill, so we even knew what they were going to legislate for afterwards. And for this one, we're being given the total runaround. They haven't released any of the information about what the change was. But even one of the interesting points about changing the word from mother to carer in order to be gender neutral is that in a survey, well, number one, most carers are women. So it's kind of pointless. And in a survey, most carers prefer to be referred to by their relationship to the person they care for. They don't wish to be only so and so's carer. They wish to be referred to as their mother, or their daughter or their father or their husband or whatever it is. So the respondents of that survey said no to that language. And yet here it is in our proposed to be put into our constitution, that remove the fact that they're nearly all women and mothers. We'll just ignore that. We'll put in this carer thing, which, to be fair, like we could use an amendment that recognised, care in society as being of value to society, but not at the expense of what's already there, and not the wording that they have proposed either.
Well, it's so vague as well. Like durable relationship could mean anything, and it has so many connotations that, like, you can imagine the court cases they're going to be like. Even
Yeah,
with regards like to immigration, if someone comes here and they what they view as a relationship is their whole extended family. Like,
yeah,
how does that work? It's
yeah.
not just, and I think they're deliberately being vague. If they actually said what a durable relationship was and defined it, people would be like, okay, but they're being vague and they're not defining anything, and I think that's probably on purpose.
Well, it seems to be because some of the proposed amendments, when they had the very rushed debate in the
Hmm.
Dáil, did want to put that kind of prescription into it to say, oh,
Hmm.
they're legally recognised relationships or something like
Yes.
that, and that was voted down by on the government side. So they stuck with this durable relationships, and they haven't released the minutes of meetings within government departments where they discussed what the possible outcomes would be of this. So
Right.
we can't vote yes to something that we don't understand. People cannot consent to something that they don't have the full information for. That's a
Yeah.
fundamental principle of consent. So we absolutely shouldn't vote yes for this for that reason. If we had the full details of what they suspected the outcomes would be, we still
Hmm.
would be left with this situation where this could end up in court with somebody trying to pull a fast one on somebody they've fallen out with. Somebody could be in a durable relationship with two adults, and then they die, and what happens then? So it's very vague, and that our organization is well aware of what happens when those kind of language issues and those kind of vague laws come into place. It's part of the reason we were formed, was to
Yeah.
address this kind of what happens when you introduce policies that appear to be inclusive, but you haven't fully worked out what's going to happen down the line
Hmm.
for this reason. That's how come we have, male sex offenders in women's prisons. That's how come we have sporting bodies allowing males to play in female sport. No,
Nonsense.
that's as an outcome of the poorly worded legislation.
Yeah.
So now they want to put poorly worded amendments into the actual constitution, which is way more difficult to get rid of. So, that's for us is a major concern of just really not so much that we don't wish to recognize, cohabiting couples or certain types of relationships, but there's no boundary around this. There's no
Right.
end point. And as somebody said, you want to know your business. So if you enter into a marriage with another adult, you stand up. Well, first of all, you both go 3 months in advance to the registrar.
Hmm.
You sign a piece of paper, say, we're intending to get married on this date. You stand up in front of witnesses on that date and you declare that you're entering into a contract. Without wanting to take away the romance from it, from that moment on, you
Yeah.
are that person's spouse. You are married to that person. You have legal obligations and rights towards each other within that. And it has an end point as well. Whereas a durable relationship, one person could think they started a durable relationship 6 months down into a relationship, and the other person could think they never started one. And so
Yeah.
who's in the right in that situation?
And how does it
If
affect, like, say you one person has more wealth than the other,
Yeah,
and then someone said they break up and they're like, well, we were only dating 2 years. Like, well, you're in a durable relationship. So
yeah,
if that is
yeah,
as important as marriage, then legally they can bring them to court, and then it's up to a judge to decide what he thinks.
yeah.
And judges in Ireland are, Jesus, I don't know, they're moronic at this stage. You know what I mean? Especially when you like see the way women are treated in courts. Like, you see, like, these guys that might sexually abuse a woman or something like that, and they get like 3 years in jail. You're like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
it's just nonsense. So to let them decide what anything is dangerous ground too.
Well, it means that the decision has been taken away from us as Irish people.
Hmm.
So it's entirely discretionary, and and once it's decided, that becomes case law. So then other people could use those kind of judgments as well, and it just gets very muddy. Now, I'm not a legal expert,
Yeah.
but our founder Alicia is, but I'm not. So I'm not going to go too hard into the sort of the legal implications. But I think
Yeah.
really what's coming out of this is very, very well respected legal minds are very concerned about that wording, and that concerns me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I've
so for
seen a few
that reason,
people.
our organization is well aware of sort of unintended consequences of trying to be really inclusive. And for me personally, I would respect their opinions that this is just not good enough wording. Um, So, and then a lot of people on the street that we're talking to as well are extremely confused. Like, I remember sort of canvassing for other referendum, and people would not like they might want you to convince them of your side,
Hmm.
but really they knew what the issue was. They knew what they were being asked for. Are you for and against abortion? Are you for and against divorce? Are you for and against same-sex marriage? They knew what they were being asked to decide on.
Yeah.
And then all your job was to just put forward your case,
Hmm.
right? Whereas in this one, you're standing on the street and people are coming over going, "Can you explain this to me?" Well, first of all, for the first 3 weeks, they were like, "What referendum?" So we seem to have moved from at least what
Yes.
referendum to
Yeah.
like, what is, can you explain this? And so we're left in the position of kind of obviously campaigning for no votes, like we have it on our leaflets and stuff. So we're not
Hmm.
hiding that we're a no vote group, but we're trying to offer also unbiased information to people so that they can at least begin to understand what they're being asked to do before we go into like why we think they should vote no, and
Mm-hmm.
that to me just is so insulting to the Irish people. The process is there for a reason. There should have been a longer time, the pre-legislative scrutiny where they're supposed to look at all the implications and release that wasn't
Hmm.
done. The debates in the Dáil were cut short, the debates in the Seanad were cut short, and the time frame between the final wording and the actual date of the referendum was so short that the Election Commission couldn't get the leaflets out until 2 weeks in advance. So the whole thing has been set up like charitably, a little bit haphazardly. If
Yeah, yeah. It's
like
purposely done, like.
well, I wouldn't like to speculate on why they did it that way because I'm not, privy to that information. But
Yeah.
at the very least, it's unprofessionally done. They've
Yeah.
skipped steps, they've rushed the whole process, they haven't given enough time for debate, all that kind of stuff. You can't argue with that. The reasons why they did that, I don't know.
Hmm.
But it makes me worry. you
Yeah,
know,
I've met so many people who like you talk to and they're like, I have no clue what this
yeah,
means. They're like, what does it mean? And you're like, they're like, what's a durable relationship? And I have to go, well, I don't really know either because
yeah,
there's no definition of it. There's nothing of it. So it's like, and there's a certain amount of kind of I've seen in the media like kind of demonization of anyone that's voting no. It's like, oh
yeah,
well, they're just conspiracy theory, far right kind of thing. That usual nonsense that you get into. You're like,
yeah, yeah,
come on,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
just at this
Oh,
stage.
who was it? I wish I could remember who the article was, but they basically said, "Oh, it's all the usual suspects throwing around all the usual red herrings," but they never actually refuted any of those red herrings that they
Yeah,
were talking about. Like to
yeah,
me, if somebody makes an argument, you refute it. You don't just say, "Oh, that's not true." Like you don't just say, "Oh, that's a red herring. I'm not even going to go there." And we're not the usual suspects. You know
yeah,
what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like there's a huge range of people all saying no to this who, would have been deemed to be progressive, like Brenda Power on the radio the other day being accused um by what's his name from the election. Oh, damn, Thomas Byrne, I think his name is, who is saying that she had campaigned against the last two, and she hadn't. It's like it was completely untrue. He
yeah,
was he was attempting to smear her as being unprogressive for some reason when he had no evidence for that, and he was wrong. It was not true. So their attempt to sort of shut down discussion and smear those of us against this as sort of being somehow like you know conservative Catholic throwbacks is really insulting.
yeah. The religious thing is always
Yeah.
thrown out, and as you said, you're not a religious organization, but that's
Oh,
always the kind of they have their little bullet points of like you have this and this, and then you're like, come,
yeah.
humans
Yeah.
are a bit more nuanced than that, I would hope.
Yeah,
But
I'd hope so. I'd hope so. I just wanted to touch on the
yeah,
replacement
yeah,
article, if you
fire
don't
away,
mind.
yeah,
Just go
yeah,
back. I know we
yeah,
kind of skipped forward to the durable relationships bit there, but
yeah. Sorry,
there's a number of issues with the proposed replacement article as well, which have
okay.
led people who kind of don't really like the mother's part, but are so against the carers part that they're going to vote no. You know what I mean? So you kind of have to take it as two. So we're saying, well, the part that recognizes women is important to be retained, but also if you look at the part about care,
Hmm.
that also is wholly inadequate. completely and utterly inadequate. The wording of it says, so the state recognises that the provision of care by members of a family among one another by reason, sorry, to one another by reason of the bonds that exist among them, gives to society, the same wording, a sport without which common good cannot be achieved, and shall strive to support such provision. So it's very limited in its promise. It's very limited in who it names. It only talks about care between family members to one another.
Right.
So no recognition that care should be located in a community, should be maybe decided upon by the person who's cared for. No recognition of the rights of disabled people to choose independent living, for example, and all responsibility pushed back to the family, which I don't know if you've had somebody in your family who required care or not, but it is
Mm.
extremely difficult
Yeah.
to get any kind of supports and any kind of respite and any kind of proper services for them. So to imagine that they thought they were doing a good thing for those families by recognizing that care and yet failing to give any extra rights, and the strive to support such provision is weaker than endeavour to ensure in the original, right? So strive to support, sure, anyone can try, like failing. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they strive to support, but the only care they're striving to support is care between family members. They haven't enunciated anything about the rights of disabled people. And the same government who've done that with this wording have failed to ratify the UN Convention on the Persons of Rights with Disabilities, which would give rights in terms of choosing independent living and your own voice in your care. They failed to ratify Senator Tom Clonan's disability rights bill last year. So they've shown us that they don't care about disabled people, that they want the families to be wholly responsible for them.
So they have no say, a disabled person, basically. Is that what this kind of
It's
saying?
not like every adult has a right, has certain rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the disability activists would say that the right to independent living and to have that supported is very important.
Hmm.
And so, and I would agree with that absolutely. But that's not enunciated anywhere in Irish law or in the Constitution.
Okay, I get you.
So it's not a, so although it sort of exists in terms of, you know, some policy somewhere, it's not enforceable,
Hmm.
and it isn't recognized sort of in terms of a rights-based approach.
Right. So would
So
disabled people be worse off under this bill, or would it be the same, or would it be, is it, how much of a difference is it?
I'd say it make no difference to them.
Okay, and that's probably the issue. It's actually not helping them in any way.
Yeah, so they were so the Citizens Assembly wanted care within the community to be recognised and the rights of
Okay.
disabled people, I think, as well. But because the care within the community isn't recognised, so all that's recognised is care between family members, and that is
Right.
very limited. And the other point about that is it's very patriarchal and it's very patronising because what they're doing by removing the article that talks about motherhood, they
Hmm.
are equating, parenting your children, raising your children with care of disabled adults, which it's totally different. Like
Okay.
your elderly mother is not the same as your 4-year-old child. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
parenting
yeah.
your children is about preparing them for the world and bringing them up and looking after them. And yes, you may end up being a carer for a disabled child. That does happen. But in
Hmm.
the main, it's a different type of relationship that you have. Whereas when you're caring for, say, an elderly relative or somebody with a disability, whether that's physical or intellectual,
Hmm.
you know, that's an adult that you're caring for with a different type of relationship. And to equate the two of them is very patronizing
Hmm.
on adults, So to me, it's erasing the fact that it's mothers who do most of the work and care and women, and it's patronizing to disabled people, and then it's kind of only acknowledging this very limited type of care between family members. So it's wholly inadequate. And you know, for me, there's so many reasons to vote no, and I have yet to even see an argument that I would need to refute from the yes side, to be honest. You know what I'm
Yeah, yeah,
trying? Because I
yeah,
like to know I like to know what people are saying, but all they're saying is, oh
yeah.
no, that's not true. Oh
Yeah,
no,
it's good to
it's
look at things like different points of view. You can't just be in your own bubble. And I've looked at loads of the yes thing, and
yeah,
they don't really say much. They don't actually like they don't, when people like challenge it, they don't actually challenge anything back. They just go, well, you should vote for it, kind of type thing. You're like, well, why? It's
Yeah,
like, well, why,
yeah,
kind of.
yeah.
So it's
So what struck me about that, and it was exactly the same thing, was it's very emotive what they're doing and what they're promoting. So they're pushing out, say, somebody with a disabled child who's saying, I'm voting yes because I'm a carer and it recognises me, or they're pushing out somebody who
mhm.
says, oh, I'm a woman and I hate this article, it's sexist, or I'm a single parent and I'm not recognised in the family thing. And well, that's not true actually, but anyway, that's beside the point. But so they're using the stories of people to promote a yes vote in a
Mhm.
similar way to happened in the last, at least the last two referendums that I remember, where they were the marriage equality and repeal the eighth, where the stories became very important. But the stories had some foundation. Like
Yeah.
there was something that if we change the constitution, this person's life would be different. So somebody was saying, if I had access to, say, termination of pregnancy for fatal fetal abnormality, my life would have been different. Or if
Mm.
I was able to marry a partner of the same sex, my life would be different. If you give me these rights, my life will be different. Whereas this is like going, I don't like what it says. Please take it out. Kind
Yeah.
of, but there's no, your life won't be different if you take it out.
Yeah.
Nobody's life will be different.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what it like. It's strange. Like, what's automatically going to happen for women when they do that? I'm just wondering. Like, it's kind of like they're. It's like the way they word it is
All,
like women are oppressed because of this, and
yeah.
like
All the
like
inequality is going to magically
yeah.
disappear. And on March the 9th, we'll be sharing everything equally with our husbands and with the men in our lives, and all that extra housework that we do and all the extra caring hours will magically disappear because we no longer have this clause in the constitution. Like,
Yeah.
it's pie in the sky. It's they this looks bad on paper. Bodies like CEDAW have said they think this is sexist, it should be removed, and so that's what the government have decided is important here. So rather than sort of address inequality in between parents or between men and women, they are removing reference to the inequality and going to pretend it doesn't exist, I presume, like, and say, aren't we all so progressive and wonderful? Like, we removed all this inequality from our constitution.
Right.
All right, but like nothing will change.
Yeah, well, it's like a very great thing for them to look like they're doing
Yeah,
for Europe. It's like, look what we're doing. We're the
yeah.
first to do like the Irish government love to be the first to do everything. Like, I don't know, people can kind of see past it now. I think people are. I just don't know what people will. I think people will vote yes. I just think it's so vague and it's been so rushed. Like, it's 2 weeks away. Like,
Yeah,
it's 2 weeks away, and a
yeah,
lot of people mightn't even know about it.
yeah.
It's just one of those things, and I don't know. I don't know. I just find it's very purposely done what they've done of rushing it and the vagueness of it and just everything, and it just yeah.
Mm.
I'm not sure. Do you think it'll pass?
I wouldn't like to put money on it now, if I'm honest. It's very difficult to know because when you're out canvassing,
Yeah, yeah.
you're meeting people who want to talk to you.
Hmm.
So presumably the people who are voting yes have already decided this. Occasionally they'll walk past and say, "Oh no, I'm voting yes" or whatever, but rarely. Usually, so a lot of people are not some people just ignore you, but a lot of people start engaging with you on the street.
Hmm.
But most of the people we speak to are either have already decided and they just come over to tell us that they're voting no,
I get you. Yeah.
or they have not decided and they're taking in the information. So there's a lot of undecided voters out there.
Hmm.
Um, it's difficult for us on the no side. It's difficult for us because we don't have any party funding, or we're not an NGO, so we're not able to use the paid staff or whatever to go and spread the message. Like, we saw that the National Women's Council are able to go into universities as part of kind of open days and set up a stall saying telling everyone why they should vote yes. But we don't
Yeah.
have those resources, and nobody really on the no side has those resources. So it's very unequal in the fight. The fight against it is very unequal. We're relying on people to sort of spread the word and to sort of use their own judgment, which
Hmm.
it's surprising the amount of people who approached us on the street who had done that. They said they hadn't heard very much about it, but they didn't like it. You know,
Right.
or that they'd read the booklet and they didn't want the changes or whatever. So there is definitely a move among ordinary people on the street like that you would just meet to tend towards a no. But it's very hard to know because we're only seeing one side of it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We're seeing the people we know. It's an echo chamber, and you have to be very careful of that. And like
Right.
those who are voting yes, kind of, they don't really want to stop and talk to you because they've already decided.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a certain dismissiveness with kind of that I've noticed too of like oh they're voting no so they're clearly like they're like our enemies almost like you can disagree with someone in life and
Yeah,
not but unfortunately we've kind of imported those American style politics of you're on one side and you're on one
yeah,
side. There's no nuance anymore. And when I was growing up, I don't think I ever heard that left right thing until I was like 20 something. Like that, I never grew up and people going saying I'm right wing or left wing. It was like just like some things you
yeah,
agreed with someone with and some people you didn't agree with them with. And we've
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of reached that idiotic point, I think, in life where people are just so divided on everything and you kind of need to
I
be,
like it's very tribal. Like if you're in this,
yes,
if you're on this tribe, then you have to agree with them on everything. And as soon as you
yeah,
disagree with them on one thing, you're out.
yeah,
And a
it's
lot of
weird.
us in our organization are those kind of lost middle, I would say. So not particularly right or left wing.
Yeah, yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people who think deeply about stuff and like to listen to different points of view and come up with their own conclusion. And a lot of people that we speak to, me included, feel very abandoned by almost all the political parties. I'd say with
Mm-hmm.
the exception of Aintu, who are do seem to have that level of being able to agree and disagree on different principles, and
Right.
I engage in debates on really the more intellectual level. But the rest of the political parties, as soon as they think something is progressive, they're all for it. They don't want to talk to you about why you think it might not be progressive. Like it's the same with with sort of the gender ideology and women's rights clash.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
they have decided that this is progressive and they will not listen to us, and we've been abandoned by all of them in terms
Yeah.
of their fear of going against progress.
Yeah, yeah. Like
We,
I had a
yeah,
transgender person on the podcast and a lovely person, but I but I don't think what people realize is most people do not have an issue with trans people. They don't have an issue with
yeah,
trans people. What people have an issue with is some lad one day deciding he wants to compete in a woman's event and he identifies as a woman and he can go into the event. Like that's just nonsense. And the
yeah,
fact that when you say that then that's called out as being transphobic is just like
yeah,
it's just stupid as well. Like the whole
or
thing, even with the whole thing with J.K. Rowling, how people
yeah,
jumped on her. You're like calling her a
yeah.
turf and these awful stuff. Like these people who were supposed to be all about love and care, and they said the most horrendous things to this woman, and you're like, do you know what irony is there? So
Yeah.
it's just that kind of stuff. Like I'm sure you've got pushback from opinions to do with that kind of subject matter.
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah, of course. But to me, it's like I respect anybody's right to hold an opinion that's different to mine. But
Hmm.
I do not respect somebody who dictates to me what kind of opinion I must hold,
I
or what
get
kind
you.
of
Yeah.
language I must use, or
Hmm.
or how I must use my energy and time. So
Yeah.
my energy and time always has been around women's rights and children's rights. My my whole sort of adult life has been around that. How do things impact women? So if I'm saying it impacts women very negatively when you say that a man can change his sex. So the man who's declared a transgender identity for all intents and purposes now is the same sex as me. I reject that. And
Hmm.
I fully believe I'm entitled to hold that opinion. Like they are entitled to believe what they want to believe. But if they
Exactly. Yeah.
say to me, you may not even argue your point in public, we like, for example, the National Women's Council to writing that open letter to deny representation to women with views like mine. Amnesty International signed it.
Wow.
So they were saying, not only were they saying we disagree with these people, they were saying those people hold views so awful that they should not even be allowed on the radio, on the television, or have political representation. And that to me is extremely threatening to democracy. So I would never say to somebody, you're not allowed to think what you think. I'll say to you, this is why I think what I think. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And if you agree or disagree, that's fine. But the fact that we're called transphobic for standing up for women's rights
Hmm.
shows very clearly that there's a clash of rights here. It shows very clearly that there are competing interests that need to be discussed. So if I
Hmm.
stand up and say I don't believe any males should be allowed in my changing rooms, and then I'm called transphobic, right? So that shows that there's a conflict of rights here, and it needs to be discussed civilly, out in public. You know, people are entitled to disagree. That's fine.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
stand up for my position. I have many reasons for it. I can
Yeah.
defend it. I'm not afraid of it. I don't like being screamed at in the street for standing up and saying that I think, men can't be women. Um, but I would not stand in the street and scream at somebody who said they think that they can.
Yeah, well, the issue is that you can't. I think the problem is that you can't actually have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
No matter if you're right or wrong or whatever, the fact that there's no conversation to be had, and I think that's the problem in a lot of modern day society. It's like you can't have that opinion, but you can't even discuss that opinion. Like there's no
Yeah.
room for discussion, which is so draconian in so many ways. Like it's just like even the Irish government trying to put in hate speech laws, and you're like, well,
Hmm.
what is hate? Like they don't define anything. Like nothing's ever defined, and the
It's
vagueness
all based
gives.
on feelings. So the
Yeah,
definition of a woman or a man is based on an internal feeling, not a fact. Definition of hate is not defined. It's based on what somebody perceives to be hatred.
yeah,
The
yeah,
definition of a durable relationship is not defined. It's based on what somebody perceives to be durable. You know,
yeah,
rather than relying on empirical evidence, sort of good case law, actual laws, those kind of things. We're being sold that feelings are the most important part of it, and like I don't want to, I don't want to kind of tell anyone their feelings aren't important, but they're often not real. Like like I don't, you know what I mean? Like, are they
yeah,
passing? They're transient.
yeah,
Your anger could be very real in the moment, but it might be totally unjustified when you've heard the whole story. You know what I mean? Like, you might feel that somebody has slighted you and they maybe just have ADHD and forgot you existed for 3 weeks. You know what I
mm,
mean? Your
mm.
feelings are not the totality of existence.
Yeah,
There's
because you can
other stuff
perceive
that,
certain things. You could go, "Oh, I think that person's angry at me," and they could be just having a bad day, and it's nothing to do with you. And you're kind of like,
yeah.
well, they're just, and that's the thing. The referendum that they've put out now, like their wording of it in Irish, is it the same as actually? Is it how close is it to the English? Because you were saying the original Irish is quite different than the English back in the when they originally wrote that. It,
It's fairly similar.
it is okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's fairly similar because it uses Tyler in terms of family again. So it's kind of gone back to that meaning of it. Um, so the proposed article talks about the provision of care by members of a family. So it's wheeled and Tyler, so it's members of a family rather than in the home.
Okay.
So it's relatively similar. Some of the wording is slightly different, but it basically means the same thing. Like they have this word that I looked up and I couldn't find it in the online dictionaries, but it's based on the word Dramer, which is ladder. So it's like we're striving to. It's like we're climbing towards. Let's say that's
Okay.
what. So it's kind of, but it's there's nothing in it that would I think cause a direct conflict.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. I
Yeah.
was thinking, I know I'm going a bit off topic here, but with Irish, I think the best way to get people to learn Irish would be to make it the highest points in the Leaving Cert. And then people actually would, because then, like people would have an incentive to learn it properly. Because when I was in school, it was so badly taught.
It's still terribly taught. Like my children went. This is totally off topic now, but I literally could talk about the Irish language for hours.
Great. Me too.
The way it's taught in schools, like, so my children went to a Gael school, and I was like, I speak Irish now. I'm not great at speaking it at home because my husband doesn't, so I find that to be a bit awkward. But anyway, so they learned Irish as they were growing up. They spoke
Hmm.
it as a spoken language. They did art. They did music. They learned poems and played with each other, played games, all that kind of stuff. And they learned to read and write as they went along. Whereas in another primary school that's English, They don't do really any of that stuff, and then suddenly they have to start learning spellings that they
Yeah.
can't even put them into a
Yeah.
sentence. They don't know what it means. Like, so they're trying to learn to read and write a language that they have no spoken concept of, and they never use outside of those 30 minutes a day. Like, it's so harmful to the language.
Yeah.
If you ask me, if I was in charge of the curriculum, they wouldn't learn any reading or writing in Irish in an English speaking school until they were maybe fourth or fifth class. Everything would be, it's playtime, it's singing time, it's poetry, it's dancing, it's fun. Irish
Mm.
would be the funnest lesson in the entire curriculum. They would love Irish because it would be the time that they get to move around, play with their friends, do all that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
then maybe begin to start writing if when much later. And the same with like, and then they go into junior cert, and the kids have been to Gael school and are destroyed by the junior cert. It's horrendous. Like, it's awful.
Mm.
They hate it. The way that it's this focus. So these are kids who can speak relatively well. It's not their first language, but they're pretty good. And then every time they write their own thoughts, they get docked marks for misspelling or a slight grammar error
Really?
here. So you have the kids who are really good at memorizing like all the correct answers will get
Yeah.
A. And the kids who can actually compose their own answers in their heads will be getting B's and C's or whatever they're called these
It's
days,
mad.
because they don't need to learn them off, so they make little mistakes when they're writing, and then they get docked for the
Oh,
mistakes that they make in
right.
their grammar and spelling, even though they're perfectly fluent in the language and can sit down and have a chat. And I know, they're the only
Yeah.
ones in the class who can hold a conversation. They're still not they're still punished for the fact that they're making mistakes with the grammar. Like, it just kills them. Like,
Yeah.
especially the junior cert. The leaving cert is a little bit better, but not much. I think it should be compulsory, absolutely, but I hate the way it's taught. I really
Yeah,
do.
but it's so bad. Like, I'd say my Irish was as bad as it was when I was in like primary school, as to like the what they teach from primary to when you finish is you not even that much. Like, it's
No.
basic like Scamaluk, Milchon, like all this
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just, and there's
Yeah.
no impetus to try and make people like, they should focus on like Irish culture too and talk about
Yeah.
stuff like that, but they don't focus on that at all. And then you have
And,
idiots like Ivan Yates on TV the other saying talking shit about Ireland. I was like, dude,
yeah.
I was so angry when I seen that. I was like,
I
bro,
was raging.
yeah, I
I
was
was
angry.
absolutely
Yeah,
raging. Yeah. It's so insulting.
yeah,
You see people who claim to be like they're proudly Irish, but yet they're perfectly happy to dump all over the language. Like, I understand people being very angry with the way that it's taught, and I understand that people find it very difficult to learn because it
hmm
isn't taught well. I get
mm,
that. But to say that it has no value to us when it's the totality of our cultural memory is just wrong. Like I
yeah,
was saying about the difference between Tailach and home, like those things, there are things in it where when you understand the context and the meaning of things in the Irish language,
hmm
it gives you a deeper understanding to where you came from. Like, why is An Taoiseach called An Taoiseach? Do you know what I mean? Why do we have a Taoiseach here?
yeah,
That kind of stuff. Like, I mean, you look into the deeper meaning of even your own surname can have a meaning. You know, where did that come from? Like, those kind of things bring it alive. Like, and they're
yeah.
really important. It's a really important part of our history and our culture. And yet, you have people like Ivan Yates and the guy shaking his hand, like saying it was totally
Oh,
valuable.
that
Just
dude, that dude.
so ignorant. And the two women just sitting there, like Sheila Shoga, like, who was just describing how she's raising her children in this language, and he just thought it was fine to just dump all over it. Like, it was horrible. It was just such a horrible piece of broadcasting.
Yeah,
So,
it was
oh,
truly shocking. I was like, dude,
yeah,
come on. But I've noticed a lot of more people now are actually kind of, whether it's just the kind of erosion of Irish culture in Ireland, I think a lot more people are actually going back and, I actually want to learn Irish now and I actually want to do it. Like, I know I'm doing it, and
yeah,
one
yeah,
of my friends is doing it, and I think my mother's going doing it. But just, it's like a kind of thing of like, we should know our own language. Like, we really should. I know it's not spoken every day and like, but we should know it. Like, when I was in
yeah.
Wales, there was people walking around speaking Welsh and I thought, oh, it was lovely. It was
Yeah, I
just
was the
lovely to
same when we were
hear.
in Wales. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it was just
yeah,
lovely. I know it's not
yeah,
South Wales they don't do it, but up north when I was in Port Murray and a place like that, they were like just speaking Welsh. I was like, oh,
yeah,
that's class. And I think
yeah,
they've only got like 250 words in Welsh. There's not that many words, they'll put in an old anglicised word in there like
yeah,
that, but
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
sweet to hear, and I think we should, you know. I don't know.
yeah.
We should.
But there's great initiatives, little pop-up Gaeltacht around the place, and um Circle Cura, that Cora, there were like conversational circles and things like that
Okay.
that just kind of bring you out of your shell a little bit, and stop that kind of like, if I'm not perfect, I'm not opening my mouth kind of thing, like, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
just become comfortable with the sound of it coming out of your mouth, like,
So what would
That's
be your advice to like learn it in like properly? Like,
listen, speak, try, have a
mm.
pint. Like, my husband becomes twice as fluent as soon as he's had a pint, because he's not in his own head anymore. Now
Right.
he's a little bit less coherent after a few, but but like, say if he was around my family, and we'd be just doing different bits and pieces where Irish was the language being spoken, he would initially be very kind of caught up, and a little bit anxious about getting things wrong. And then after just relaxing for a while, he'd be much happier. Just being
Hmm.
exposed to it, hearing it in in a living way is really important. Like, tune into the radio. Watch TG Cahir is brilliant.
I
They
watched
really
TG
good
Cahir.
programs as well. Like,
Yeah,
so some of the
yeah.
stuff is really interesting as
They
well.
do some great programs, TG Cahir.
Yeah, yeah,
Golden
yeah.
Girls is on there too the odd time.
What?
You get
Yeah.
the Golden Girls.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
Ask
they
Gaeilge.
do great stuff. Like, and they
Yeah.
listen. Like, you can even listen to a match, like, and see if you can pick out the same words over and over. What did that word mean? If you're watching, say, like, I love to watch the ladies Gaelic football and the camogie. And they're only on TG Car. So, like, my husband now is like, he'll know what the words are now for, it's there for real, or it's whatever, like
Yeah.
the technical terms that the commentators are using, like, he'll pick them up. It's like, I find it very funny because I forget that he doesn't know what they're saying. So
Yeah.
if they say something funny, I'll be like chuckling away, and he's like, are you going to share, or what's happening here? I'll be like, oh yeah, that was funny. Or did we talking about so and so's dad down the road? When they fill in,
Yeah.
would you just get used to it, and the
Yeah.
musicality of it? My dad, um, my dad was a very fluent. Like, he was a translator, extremely high level
Oh
of Gaeilge.
wow.
Like, worked all his life through Irish mostly, but he also used to teach sometimes. And his method of teaching was literally just bring his guitar in and start learning songs. So if
Oh,
you're
brilliant.
musical, because the musicality of it makes the pronunciation easier. You listen to a song and sing along with a good singer,
Yeah.
you will pick up the words that they're singing, and the pronunciation will be easier. You'll find easier to get your mouth around the phrases and the words. And if you have kids or nieces and nephews or whatever, like, learn them little songs that they can sing as Gaeilge, like really simple ones that
Right.
just, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and that kind of crack. Like, and it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
takes away that tension that you have. I'm not saying you have it, but most people I know who are learners are tense because of,
Yeah.
like, it's that thing of, it's the fear, because the only time you learned it or heard it was when you were tense, like.
Yeah, and it's weird to be learning a language that is your country's language and you can't speak it and you're living in
Yeah,
your own country. I
yeah,
don't know of any other country I know you could say probably Wales too, but I mean, but
yeah,
they have way more fluent speakers than we do. But I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
quite a strange thing to be
It
learning a
is.
language that should be your language. I find it like, it's just yeah,
I
it's
never really
strange.
thought about it like that. This podcast will nearly have to be two different podcasts,
Yeah,
because
I know. I'll come back and you can talk about Irish sometime because I like.
it's but like, honestly, I think it's brilliant that you're learning, and any bit of learning, it'll benefit you, because your brain
Yeah,
expands as you do it. So,
yeah, yeah.
and it's sort of, but it's that tension. It's finding ways of removing that tension is just the way
Yeah.
to go, because, like, you can't learn if you're wound up about it.
Mm,
You just
mm,
can't, like.
mm.
And there, like, I mean, if you've loads of money, there's brilliant courses out there. There's adult residential courses, weekend courses, week-long courses, different levels you'll find in different organizations, and stuff that they'll do for adults. Like, so, there are
Right.
things out there, but it's just a case of finding them. To me, I think the most important thing is absorbing it, hearing it, and then eventually letting it come out.
Yeah, it's weird like when you watch TG Carr and you just like watching even kind of like, I could be sitting there with my guitar and I do play the TV. I always have the TV on, I'll be doing something and you kind of will after like a few weeks there's certain things you've picked up on, like just it's kind of ruminating through your brain. You're like, oh, I kind of get that, and I kind of get that, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
because at the
yeah,
start they're like, whoa, they're going very quick for me. I don't know what
yeah,
they're saying.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just to
yeah,
kind of, and then you remember stuff from when you were a kid. You're like, oh, I kind of remember that, and I remember that. So it's just yeah, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
But
It's in there.
anyways,
It just
it's
needs
yeah.
space.
Yeah, it's not much in there, but it's I need to put a lot more in there. That's the thing. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyways, you got sidetracked. But before I let you go, so what would you say to people why they should vote no?
Okay, so on the first one you're going to be asked for is the 39th Amendment, which is the insertion of the words "and other durable relationships"
Mm-hmm.
after marriage, and the removal of I can't remember what now, sorry. So the change in the definition of family. I would say for this one, we do not have the information needed to make this decision. You
Okay,
cannot make informed decisions in the absence of all information. It's impossible. So for that reason, vote no. They can try again.
great.
Right. And then for the second, you know, it's important to acknowledge that women and mothers do give to the state a support without which the common good cannot be achieved. That is a fact. It is a fact that women do all that work, and it should be recognised. And their protection in this constitution should not be removed. So, one, vote no to retain the wording, and vote no because the carers amendment that they have proposed is wholly inadequate, and it'll be impossible to get any change. It takes a generation to change a poorly worded amendment to the constitution.
Mm-hmm.
We can't
Mm-hmm.
put it in there in the first place. So, for that reason, vote no to the second as well.
Okay. Well, Source, thanks so much for doing this. I know we went off on a tangent on Irish, but it was a good tangent. It
You
was a
got
good
me on my
tangent.
special interest out.
Yeah, there you go. If you ever go on Mastermind,
I
ask
know.
Gaelgak.
I
Well,
definitely wouldn't be able to stick to the topic anyway. That's my problem.
thanks very much for doing this. I
No,
really
my pleasure.
appreciate your time, and have a lovely
Okay.
day.
Gar mí agus
Oh,
lá.
you too. Thanks.